So to ring in the spring, I decided to journey back to my local freshly reopened cinema and see Chaos Walking. Not to be confused with Chaos Walkin'.
The ice is gonna break!
Directed by Doug Liman, based on the YA novel series by Patrick Ness, and starring Tom Holland, Daisy Ridley, and Mads Mikkelsen. And it was
Kind of interesting.
kind of boring.
Environments look
Snake. Daisy Ridley's kind
Weird
of
aliens.
Dog. Trees.
Trees.
Kaboom. Surprisingly unsurprising. We open in the year 2257 on a planet called New World, where a young man named Todd is hunting with his dog. As he does, a strange iridescent haze encircles his head, audibly emitting his thoughts. In returning to his village, we see that Todd doesn't get along well with the other guys, and they are all guys. He's regarded as a bit soft, and so he looks up to the stoic mayor in lieu of his own father, much to Dad's chagrin. Meanwhile, in outer space, a crew of astronauts are approaching New World to check in on the settlers. However, their ship crashes, and after a panicked Todd leads the mayor to the wreckage, he's shocked to learn that the survivor is a girl, something he's never seen before. We are told that the planet's indigenous species, the spackle, killed all the women many years ago. The survivor, who we'll come to know as Viola, says that another ship will be on its way, but while Todd sees a chance to help her escape, the mayor sees a fallen angel as a threat, one that he orders his men to stop at any cost. And from there, it becomes a journey across treacherous terrain in search of a way to rescue Viola, as Todd must learn to control the gift and curse of literally airing his thoughts, all while his pursuers are led by the man he once looked up to. When I first heard the summary of this movie, and even after I watched the trailer, I worried that the noise would be too annoying and silly of a concept to take seriously. However, I have to give the production credit for nailing such a bizarre idea. How and why the noise works is never explained, but its sound has a layered, ethereal quality that stays appealing to the ear even when a character is just repeating the same word or phrase over and over. Likewise, the prismatic miasma, which it appears as, isn't just a visual metaphor, but it has important physical attributes. Walking behind Todd has Viola strolling through his thoughts as if downwind from a bad stench, and in perhaps the film's most distinctive image, a billowing plume of noise on the horizon signals the arrival of enemy forces like a forest fire. Scene by scene, the noise is basically a diegetic internal monologue, allowing characters to hear each other's thoughts along with the audience. The noise also exudes memories, imagination, and dreams. With enough focus, men can even project illusions. This roundabout superpower adds anxious ambiguity to several sequences, as what's real and what's just finely tuned noise becomes unclear. For some men, then, the noise empowers them to become master manipulators, and for others, particularly Todd, it's an embarrassing liability. Control your noise is a common admonition among men of the New World. However, introverts of any gender are sure to cringe at the notion of having their stream of consciousness flow freely. In theory, this allows our players to act verbally and non-verbally simultaneously, and there's definitely both tense and comic moments where what Todd says and what he thinks are two very different things. Holland's character is constantly at war with his own mind in a way that recalls Gollum's monologuing for how it practically splits one character into two. However, what the effect regularly amounts to is people just blankly staring at each other while ADR does the dramatic lifting. Holland in particular comes off as pretty vacant a lot of the time. It makes sense that being raised with telepathy as the norm would leave you iffy at body language, but that doesn't make the resultant performance any less stiff. After all, seeing how an actor delivers a line can be as critical as hearing it. If nothing else, I look forward to some surreal comedy from watching this film on mute once it hits streaming. But the noise's vulnerabilities aren't just subtext. We learned that since it somehow only affects men, dudes of the New World didn't like women being able to see everything that they were thinking and not vice versa. What men want crossed with the Screwfly solution doesn't scream tentpole film, so for good or ill, the film doesn't really shoot for blockbuster status. Some lush Cascadian environments stand in for an alien world's vast wilds, but the set design and the costumes are fairly humble. We see a little futuristic weaponry, but it's mostly just blocky red guns that shoot incendiary rounds. The film draws strongly from westerns, actually, from the layout of the New World's villages, to the settlers' wardrobes, including a pimp and fur coat on Mads Mikkelsen, to the horseback posse who pursue our heroes. Between this and an open acknowledgement that humans invaded this planet, New World starts sounding less like a placeholder and more like a callback to a very different group of historic settlers. This becomes a loaded conversation that the film swiftly holsters, however. Only a single ET appears for a brief scuffle, looking like a muddy Slender Man, before they're dropped from the plot. The ensemble cast is well suited to their roles, especially the absolute Mads man, who once again brings his Danish daddy energy to a great creepy villain performance. Still, not everyone gets as much to do as they could. Nick Jonas shows up a few times, seemingly just to play the Gary Oak to Todd's Ash Ketchum, and David Oyelowo's Preacher gets the coolest noise, a fiery aura which illustrates his apocalyptic sermons, but otherwise feels like a one-note henchman. Indeed, the world building here is utilitarian, but thankfully it rarely relies on exposition unless it's natural, such as when Viola reads an old journal to an illiterate Todd. Then again, in a world where almost everyone announces what they're feeling at all times, there's kinda constant exposition throughout anyway. I would be curious to know what female audiences' collective response to this film will be. With the concept, it had a free pass to dive into misogyny and numerous other hot topics, and one could glean a commentary on toxic masculinity here. One of Todd's most common thoughts is, be a man. One antagonist bemoans that you can't trust girls, and another chastises an opponent for hiding his noise like a woman. Never before has men going their own way so accurately transpired. However, in a deft, or some might say cowardly move, it makes such sexism matter without vilifying either men or women. All the women we see are strong and capable, and not held back by the lack of noise. As reverse mind readers, they interact with men like zoo animals, amused or annoyed by their unconscious outbursts, but justifiably fearful when those contemplations grow angry. Viola in particular, with her 23rd century toolkit, makes Todd look like a caveman by comparison as he roasts a monster kebab over a fire or bathes with his clothes on. In turn, she's lived on a spaceship so long that nature itself is unfamiliar to her, so Todd gets a chance to teach her about exotic things like rain. It's also worth noting that if only on account of a PG-13 rating, the men's musings stay relatively chaste, and there's never a sexual threat raised for tacky stakes, which a lesser script could have definitely thrown in. Neither is Daisy Ridley a prize for our protagonist. Todd proves good men with the noise exist, but he doesn't get the girl. And he's okay with that. Still, the film occupies an uncomfortable middle ground. Its leads feel just a bit too old for a YA adaptation, but so too does it pull a lot of thematic punches in hopes of drawing a teen audience. As director of The Bourne Identity, Jumper, and Edge of Tomorrow, Lyman is an old hand at delivering kinetic, high-concept genre fare, but Chaos Walking isn't half as memorable as any of those flicks. Indeed, what shocked me most about the film was how conventional it was. Upon the film's announcement in 2011, noted cinematic mind freak Charlie Kaufman was tapped to draft the script, which had me cautiously psyched for a bleak, introspective head trip. However, after changing screenwriters across a decade, the result in 2021 is a polished but standard mishmash of tropes from a post-apocalyptic and stranger in a strange land fiction. The journey across Terra Incognita following an old map to a destination for rescue, trying to protect a special woman in a world full of hostile men, the hero on a quest in exile from a dystopian society, hunted by a band of madmen on horseback. There's even an adorable doggy companion. At bottom, it's a traditional crashed on an alien planet story, except the aliens are incels. There's no real philosophical or metaphorical angle to tie all of these cliches together. It talks about big topics like gender roles, religion, colonization, even book burning at one point. But for better or worse, it does so in a very matter-of-fact way nestled into the world building. It's all circumstantial, not political. And it's just as cagey about its conclusion. We don't see the villain die, and the film just kind of stops shortly afterwards, with Todd and Viola on slightly better terms and the general prospect of more settlers on the way. Setting us up for chaos running, I guess? So, Stray, thoughts? The phrase chaos walking is never said in the film. It only appears in an opening text block which quotes an unknown New World settler. I'm sure the book series goes into more detail on this, and I'm not that every movie's title needs to be uttered on screen.
So that's it? What, we some kind of Suicide Squad?
But here it feels both obtuse and goofily blunt. There is, to be sure, chaos and walking in this story. One character succinctly refers to the noise as every thought in our heads on display, which would also make a fantastic slogan for Twitter. I know it's a bit trite to compare sci-fi movies to Star Wars, but Daisy Ridley here rides a speeding vehicle through a forest for a chase scene, fools the bad guy by projecting a hologram, and climbs down into the bowels of a crashed spaceship, so...
It's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
The network of wicker balls which we see comprise a spackle settlement is one of the film's most unique images, so it's a shame that this brief shot ends up being in service of just a red herring. The spackles show up too little to be satisfying when you think they're relevant, and when you learn the twist, it feels like they also weren't around long enough to be a convincing scapegoat. I'm willing to bet that there's more than a few deleted scenes of these things. Daisy Ridley rocks some orange overalls, which I found more than a little evocative of Milla Jovovich's get-up in The Fifth Element. Similarly, seeing a black preacher who stokes fear with a literal fire and brimstone rhetoric felt familiar after playing The Evil Within 2. And this is certainly not Tom Holland's first confrontation with a foe who can conjure illusions. Todd and Viola summit a tower which is part of a series of supports for an unfinished monorail, So I could only think of one thing at that moment.
You must construct additional pylons.
A completely reasonable innovation that I nevertheless hadn't considered until this film brought it to my attention is cryo chambers for horses. The film's final action beat is a "we gotta climb up there to realign the antenna" scene, which offers Holland a prime demo reel for acrobatics that he'll no doubt display in the Uncharted movie. And so prodigious is Mads' control of his noise that he's able to project it like a loudspeaker to call out Todd for their climatic fight. If there's any dragons on this planet, then he should be ably equipped to confront them as well. Overall, I'd give this film a 5.5 out of 10. It's not the low-key, low-budget sci-fi drama that Kaufman probably would have offered, but neither is it the gonzo blockbuster that it comes across as. Literally and figuratively, it's an A to B picture. It has a peculiar, well-explored concept and a strong cast, but the motions they go through have all been played out before, and with more panache. It's a commentary on imperialism and the battle of the sexes without any teeth. Odd, but deceptively simple. For a film about noise, its signal is all too clear, but you'll still be wanting to change the channel. But whether you tune in or not, do continue to be mindful of your local theater's COVID-era regulations. This was my first theatrical visit of the year after a statewide relapse into Phase 1 regulations left me stuck with streaming for the better part of winter. I found myself a bit rusty on the rebound, underestimating the amount of attendees such that I was trapped in the quarantine cube all through the trailers. I sat in the very back of the theater this time, thinking that the seclusion would leave me free to take review notes on my phone without fear of irritating seatmates. But this proved impractical in execution, and I was left transcribing my usual handwritten replay in relative darkness. Regardless, I felt healthy then, and I still do, but that's just me in my comfort zone. I won't tell others what risks to take en route to entertainment. Just see what you want when it's playing, and mask up as you do. Maybe keeping a little vial of the old hand sand at the ready. As the warmer months creep near, studios are going to have to decide whether to release their hits on HBO Max or push them ever further into 2021. Whatever happens, though, I'll be here to make some noise about it. So stay safe, and I'll see you then.